Jake Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle and felt his boots touch solid ground for the first time in 3 weeks. The air on Zephyria Prime smelled clean and sweet, like flowers he had never seen before. Everything around him looked perfect. Too perfect. The buildings of Zephyria Prime Academy stretched up into a pale blue sky without a single cloud. The walls were smooth and white, catching the light from 2 small suns that hung overhead. Gardens filled every space between the buildings, full of plants that glowed softly in colors that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The whole place looked like something from a dream. Jake picked up his single bag and walked toward the main building. Other students moved around the campus, but they were unlike anything he had ever seen. Some looked like giant birds with colorful feathers. Others appeared to be made of living crystal that caught and scattered the sunlight. A few moved through the air without touching the ground, floating like they weighed nothing at all. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at him. A tall figure approached from the main building. She moved like water flowing uphill, smooth and impossible. Her skin was pale green and seemed to shift like liquid. 2 large eyes, bigger than Jake's fists, looked down at him with what he hoped was kindness. "You must be Jake Martinez," she said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Principal Lyra Sind. Welcome to Zephyria Prime Academy." Jake tried to smile. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm happy to be here." The principal's eyes grew even larger. "Ma'am, how curious. We must discuss your cultural integration protocols. But first, let me show you to your living quarters." As they walked through the campus, Jake noticed how quiet everything was. No engines rumbled in the distance. No sirens wailed. No construction. Noise echoed between buildings. Even the students spoke in voices so soft he could barely hear them. The only sounds were the gentle whisper of wind through impossible gardens and the soft hum of technology he could not identify. "Your room is in the interspecies dormitory," Principal Lyra Sind explained. "You will be sharing living space with students from 7 different worlds. I trust this will not present difficulties." "No, ma'am, I mean no principal. I grew up in New York City. I'm used to different kinds of people." The principal stopped walking. Her liquid skin rippled in patterns Jake could not read. "New York City. Yes, I have read about this place in your species files. One of your population centers. 12 million beings living in close proximity." She paused. "How did they prevent constant warfare?" Jake blinked. "Warfare? It's just a city. People live there. They work and go to school and raise families. 12 million predators in one location," the principal whispered as if speaking to herself. "And they coexist peacefully. Remarkable." They reached a building that looked like all the others, perfect and white and covered in glowing plants. Inside, the halls were wide and filled with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The principal led him to a door that opened without being touched. The room was larger than Jake's entire apartment back home. Windows covered 1 wall, looking out over gardens that stretched to the horizon. The furniture looked comfortable but strange, clearly designed for beings who were not shaped like humans. "Your roommates will arrive shortly," the principal said. "Pip is an Averian from Skyreach 7. Keth comes from the crystal fields of Prism. Zara grew up in the garden forests of Verdania Prime. And Nox travels from the water cities of Aquarius Beta." Jake nodded, trying to remember all the names and planets. "There is one more thing we must discuss," the principal continued. Her voice became even softer. "Your species file contains certain information that concerns our faculty." "What kind of information?" "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world in our databases." Jake had never heard the term before. "What does that mean?" "It means your planet is considered extremely dangerous by galactic standards. The gravity is nearly 3 times what most species consider comfortable. Your weather systems are chaotic and violent. Your world contains predators that could hunt and kill most sentient beings." Jake looked around the perfect room on the perfect world under perfect skies. "I guess Earth is pretty rough compared to this place." "The faculty is concerned about your participation in certain activities. Physical education, for example. We want to ensure the safety of all students." I'll be careful, Jake said. I don't want to hurt anyone. The principal's skin rippled again. It is not your intentions we worry about, Jake Martinez. It is your capabilities. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the door opened. 4 beings entered the room, each more impossible than the last. Pip looked like a small person covered in bright blue feathers. She had huge eyes and delicate hands that ended in tiny claws. She stood barely as tall as Jake's waist and seemed to weigh almost nothing. Keth was made entirely of purple crystal that hummed softly as he moved. Light passed through his body and came out in rainbow patterns on the walls. Zara appeared to be a walking tree, with bark-like skin and leaves growing from her head instead of hair. She smelled like flowers and fresh rain. Knox wore a suit filled with water, and Jake could see gills moving behind the transparent faceplate. She moved like she was swimming through the air. "Hello," Jake said, raising one hand in what he hoped was a friendly gesture. All 4 of his new roommates jumped backward. Pip made a sound like a bird in distress. Keth's crystal body flashed, bright white. Zara's leaves rustled like she was caught in a strong wind. Knox's biosuit began beeping rapidly. "Perhaps introductions can wait," the principal said quickly. "Jake Martinez, classes begin tomorrow. Your schedule has been uploaded to your room's information system. Please review the cultural interaction guidelines before engaging with other students." She left quickly, herding Jake's roommates out with her. Jake stood alone in his perfect room on a perfect world, wondering what he had gotten himself into. Through the window, he could see other students in the gardens below. They were all looking up at his window, and even from this distance, he could tell they were afraid. Tomorrow would be interesting. Jake woke up before dawn, as he always did. The room was still dark, and his roommates were sleeping quietly in their strange beds. Pip hung upside down from a perch like a bat. Keth had dimmed his crystal body until he looked like a statue. Zara had planted her feet in a pot of soil and spread her leaves wide. Knox floated in a tank of water that hummed softly. Jake dressed quietly and went to find the dining hall. The corridors were empty and silent. His footsteps echoed loudly on the smooth floors, and he tried to walk more softly. Everything here seemed designed for beings who barely made any noise at all. The dining hall was a vast room with tables that could change height and shape for different species. Food dispensers lined the walls, each one marked with symbols Jake could not read. He found one that showed pictures and pressed buttons until something that looked like breakfast appeared on a tray. The food was bland and soft, nothing like the strong flavors he was used to. He ate quickly, checking the time on his communication device. Classes would start soon. Other students began entering the dining hall as Jake finished eating. They moved in small groups, speaking in voices so quiet he could barely hear them. When they saw him, conversations stopped. Eyes turned in his direction, then quickly looked away. Jake tried to smile at a group of Avarians, but they fluttered their feathers and moved to a table on the far side of the room. A cluster of lithoids went completely still when he walked past, their crystal bodies flashing with nervous light. He found his first class and took a seat near the back. The classroom filled with students who all seemed to know each other. They chatted quietly until Jake sat down, then fell silent. The teacher, a floating blob of light that called itself Professor Glomar, began the lesson on galactic history. "Today we will discuss the formation of the Galactic Cooperative," the professor said in a voice like singing. "This peaceful alliance was created after the Great Wars ended, when civilized species decided violence was no longer acceptable." Jake raised his hand. What were the Great Wars about? The entire class turned to stare at him. Professor Glomar's light flickered several times before answering. The Great Wars were fought over resources and territory. They ended over 3,000 years ago when civilized beings realized that cooperation was better than conflict. Since then, no member species has engaged in warfare. 3,000 years, Jake asked. Humans were still fighting wars last century. We had 2 major world wars, and smaller conflicts are still happening. The silence in the room became thick enough to cut. Several students made sounds that Jake was learning meant distress in their languages. Professor Glomar's light dimmed significantly. Perhaps we should move on to the next topic, the professor said quickly. During break between classes, Jake heard whispered conversations in the hallways. Words like violent and dangerous and death world followed him wherever he went. Students moved out of his way when he walked down corridors, pressing themselves against walls as if he might attack them at any moment. His second class was biology, taught by Dr. Veltara, a tall plant-like being with gentle movements. She was discussing the wildlife of various worlds when Jake's communication device beeped softly. He reached for it without thinking. The movement was quick and smooth, the kind of reflex that came from living in a city where things happened fast. His hand shot out, grabbed the device and brought it to his eye level in less than a second. Every student in the class jerked backward. Several Averians fell off their perches. A lithoid student's crystal body flashed so bright it hurt to look, and Dr. Veltara's leaves rustled like she was caught in a hurricane. "I'm sorry," Jake said, putting the device away. "I didn't mean to startle anyone." Dr. Veltara took several moments to calm her leaves. "Perhaps you could demonstrate more controlled movements, Mr. Martinez. Your reflexes appear to be quite developed." "It's normal where I come from," Jake said. "You have to move fast in the city or you'll miss the subway." "Subway?" asked a small Averian student named Chirp. "Underground trains that carry millions of people every day. If you're not quick, you get left behind." The students exchanged looks of horror. Dr. Veltara's leaves had gone completely still. "Millions of your species travel together in underground tunnels?" she asked carefully. "Sure. It's the fastest way to get around New York. Sometimes the cars are so packed you can barely move. People push and shove to get on and off." A Verdanian student made a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Your people push each other, deliberately?" "It's not mean or anything. It's just how you survive in a crowded place. You've got to be tough." Dr. Veltara cleared her throat, which sounded like branches creaking. "Let us return to our discussion of peaceful herbivores, shall we?" At lunch, Jake sat alone at a table, near the center of the room. He had brought a sandwich from the food dispensers, though it tasted like cardboard compared to food from home. Around him, other students whispered and pointed. A group of brave lithoid students approached his table. Their crystal bodies were dim with nervousness. "Excuse us," one of them said. "We are conducting research for our planetary studies class. Would you be willing to answer questions about Earth?" "Sure," Jake said, gesturing for them to sit down. "What do you want to know?" The lithoids remained standing, keeping the table between them and Jake. "Is it true that your planet has creatures called bears?" "Yeah, lots of them. Black bears, brown bears, polar bears. I saw a black bear once when my family went camping in the mountains." The lithoids' bodies flashed with alarm. "You encountered a bear and survived?" "It wasn't a big deal. We just made noise and backed away slowly. Bears usually don't want to mess with people unless you get between them and their cubs. The database says bears can weigh over 300 kilograms and run faster than most vehicles," another lithoid said. Jake shrugged. "The big ones can, sure, but they're not really interested in hunting people. Now mountain lions, those are scary. They're ambush predators." All three lithoids went completely transparent with fear. Students at nearby tables had stopped eating to listen. Jake noticed that the entire dining hall had gone quiet. "What is a mountain lion?" the first lithoid whispered. "Big cats that hunt alone. They can jump 40 feet and kill prey much larger than themselves. They're perfect killing machines." A crash echoed through the dining hall as a Verdanian student fainted and knocked over a table. Several Averians took flight, their distress calls filling the air. The Aquari students' biosuits began broadcasting emergency signals. Jake looked around at the chaos his simple explanation had caused. "Are you guys okay? I was just talking about animals." But the damage was done. Word spread through the academy like wildfire. The human had casually survived encounters with creatures that could slaughter entire classrooms of students. He spoke of deadly predators the way others might discuss the weather. By the end of the day, Jake Martinez had become the most feared student in the history of Zephyria Prime Academy, and he had no idea why. Jake had been at the academy for a week when he received the message about physical education class. The notification appeared on his room's information screen during breakfast, glowing with official academy symbols. All students must participate in cross-species fitness evaluation. Report to Gymnasium Complex 7 at 0900 hours. Bring appropriate exercise clothing. Jake read the message twice, then shrugged. He had been wondering when they would get around to gym class. Back home, physical education was mandatory, and he had always been good at sports. How hard could alien gym class be? His roommates were less calm about the news. Pip fluttered her feathers nervously when she saw the message. Physical education with the human, she whispered to herself. We are all going to die. Keth's crystal body flashed rapid patterns of purple and red. In lithoid communication, Jake had learned, this meant extreme anxiety. Perhaps we could claim illness, Keth suggested. My people sometimes develop crystal fatigue. Zara's leaves had turned a sickly yellow color. The stories about his species keep getting worse. Did you hear what happened in biology class yesterday? Jake looked up from his breakfast. What happened? In biology class? All four of his roommates went silent. Knox's biosuit made worried bubbling sounds. Nothing important, Pip said quickly. Just normal class discussions. Jake had noticed that conversation stopped whenever he entered a room, but he had not realized his classmates were talking about him. He finished eating and went to find something to wear for gym class. The academy had provided him with exercise clothing that fit his human body shape. The material was strange, light and flexible, designed to work with species that had very different needs. He put it on and headed to the gymnasium complex. Gymnasium Complex 7 was the largest building Jake had seen on campus. It rose like a crystal mountain, with walls that seemed to be made of some transparent material that shifted colors in the light. Inside, the space was vast enough to hold several football fields. Other students were already there, gathered in small groups, by species. They all wore similar exercise clothing, though some had modifications for wings, crystal bodies, or water-breathing apparatus. When Jake entered, every conversation stopped. Coach Vexithera stood in the center of the gymnasium. She was tall and graceful, with long limbs that moved like she was underwater. Her species came from a world with very low gravity, and she seemed to barely touch the ground when she walked. Welcome, students, she said in a voice like flowing water. Today we will conduct fitness evaluations to help integrate our new exchange student into our physical education program. All eyes turned to Jake. He raised one hand in a small wave. Half the students in the room took a step backward. Coach Vexithera continued speaking, but Jake could tell she was nervous. She kept glancing at him while she explained the exercise course they would complete. You will work in mixed teams of 5 students each. The course is designed to test agility, strength, endurance, and teamwork. Each station must be completed by the entire team before moving to the next. She gestured to different areas of the gymnasium. Jake could see obstacles. That looked like playground equipment. Though built for beings much smaller and weaker than humans, there were rope climbs that barely reached twice his height, balance beams as wide as sidewalks, and walls to climb that had handholds every few inches. Team assignments are posted on the information boards, Coach Vexithera announced. Please, find your teammates and begin with stretching exercises. Jake walked to the board and found his name. He was assigned to Team 7 with Pip, Keth, Zara, and Knox, his roommates. When he found them, they were huddled together like they were planning for war. Hello, teammates, Jake said cheerfully. Pip made a sound like a squeaking toy. Keth went, completely transparent. Zara's leaves began dropping to the floor. Knox's biosuit started beeping rapidly. Are you guys okay? Jake asked. We are fine, Pip said in a voice barely above a whisper. Completely fine. Not afraid at all. Coach Vexithara called for attention. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a cooperative exercise. The goal is teamwork, not competition. Please be mindful of your teammates' different abilities. She looked directly at Jake when she said this. We will start with basic stretching and warm-up exercises, the coach continued. Please spread out and follow my movements. Jake found a space and began stretching the way he had been taught in school. He reached down to touch his toes, rolled his shoulders, and did a few jumping jacks to get his blood moving. Around him, the other students were doing much gentler movements. They bent slowly and carefully, as if they might break if they moved too quickly. Their version of jumping jacks looked more like slow dancing. Jake noticed he was the only one who seemed to actually be warming up. Everyone else looked like they were already tired from the gentle stretching. "Excellent," Coach Vexithara said, though her voice sounded strained. "Now we will begin the obstacle course. Team 7, you will start at Station 1. Station 1 was the rope climbing area. 5 ropes hung from the ceiling, each one marked with colored bands to show how high students should climb. The target height for the exercise was marked with green bands about 12 feet up. Each team member must reach the green marker, Coach Vexithara explained. Take your time and use proper safety techniques. Pip went first. She fluttered her wings to help pull herself up the rope, but her small size made it difficult. After 5 minutes of struggle, she managed to reach the green marker and came down exhausted. Keth tried next, but his crystal body was heavy, and he could barely lift himself off the ground. Jake watched him strain and struggle, making small progress up the rope. "Do you want some help?" Jake offered. "No," Keth said quickly, his body flashing bright white with alarm. "I can do it myself." It took Keth 10 minutes to reach the marker. Zara did better using her natural tree climbing abilities, but she was breathing hard when she came down. Nox had the most trouble, as her water-filled suit made movement difficult on land. Finally, it was Jake's turn. He grabbed the rope and looked up at the green marker that seemed ridiculously close. Without thinking about it, he pulled himself up hand over hand, moving smoothly and quickly. He reached the green marker in about 3 seconds. The gymnasium went completely silent. Jake looked down and saw every student and coach staring up at him with expressions of pure terror. Some had their mouths hanging open. Others looked like they had seen a monster. "Is this high enough?" Jake called down. Coach Vexithara's voice cracked when she answered. "That is sufficient, Mr. Martinez. Please come down, slowly." Jake slid down the rope and landed softly on the mat. His teammates were pressed against the far wall, staring at him like he had just performed magic. "Ready for the next station?" Jake asked. Nobody answered. Jake waited at the bottom of the rope while his teammates slowly moved away from the wall. They looked at him like he might explode at any moment. "Should we go to the next station?" Jake asked. Pip nodded quickly, her feathers still ruffled with fear. The other teams had stopped their own exercises to watch Team 7. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes following his every movement. Station 2 was the balance beam course. The beams were about as wide as a sidewalk and only 3 feet off the ground. Colorful obstacles were placed along the length of each beam, soft foam blocks to step over, hanging ribbons to duck under, and small platforms to jump between. Coach Vexithara explained the rules. Students must cross the entire beam without falling. If you fall, you must start over. Take your time and focus on maintaining balance. The other teams were still working on this station. Jake watched as students moved slowly across the beams, arms stretched out for balance, taking careful steps like they were walking on ice. Some fell off and had to restart multiple times. The fastest student took nearly 5 minutes to complete the course. Pip went first from Team 7. She used her wings to help keep balanced, but still wobbled dangerously several times. The foam blocks were difficult for her small legs to step over, and she had to jump to clear each one. After 8 minutes, she made it across. Keth's heavy crystal body made balance even harder. He moved one careful step at a time, his body flashing nervous colors. When he reached the hanging ribbons, he had to duck very low, and his shifting weight nearly sent him tumbling off the beam. He made it across after 12 minutes, but his crystal was dim with exhaustion. Zara did better, her natural tree-dwelling abilities helping her stay balanced. She moved smoothly across the beam, though she was still careful and slow. Nox struggled with her water-filled suit, the liquid sloshing back and forth as she tried to maintain balance. Then it was Jake's turn. He stepped onto the beam and immediately noticed how wide it was. This was easier than walking on a normal sidewalk. He started across at his usual walking pace, stepping over the foam blocks without slowing down. When he reached the hanging ribbons, he ducked under them without breaking stride. The small platforms meant for jumping were so close together that Jake barely had to stretch his legs to step from one to the next. He crossed the entire course, in about 30 seconds, moving at what felt like a casual stroll. When he jumped down from the end of the beam, the entire gymnasium was silent again. Students from other teams had stopped their exercises completely. Some were pointing at him with expressions of disbelief. "That was fun," Jake said to his teammates. "What's next?" His teammates looked like they wanted to disappear. Knox's biosuit was beeping so rapidly it sounded like a fire alarm. Station 3 was the wall climbing section. The walls were about 15 feet high with handholds and footholds placed generously across the surface. They looked like rock climbing walls, but much easier than anything Jake had seen at the gym back home. Other students were taking 20 minutes or more to climb these walls. They moved carefully from one hold to the next, resting frequently, and calling out encouragement to each other. Jake's teammates went first again. Pip used her wings to help, but still struggled with the larger handholds designed for bigger species. Keth found climbing difficult with his heavy crystal body. Zara used her natural climbing skills but moved slowly and carefully. Knox had to be helped by Coach Vexithera because her water suit made climbing nearly impossible. Jake looked up at the wall. The handholds were huge and placed so close together that climbing would be like going up a ladder. He grabbed the first holds and started up. He moved smoothly and quickly, flowing from one handhold to the next without pause. His muscles, trained by Earth's heavy gravity, found the wall ridiculously easy. He reached the top in less than a minute and rang the bell that marked completion. When he rappelled down, he found the entire gymnasium staring at him in shocked silence. Some students had their hands over their mouths. Others looked like they might faint. "Are you feeling well, Mr. Martinez?" Coach Vexithera asked. Her voice was shaking. "I feel great," Jake said. "This is a good workout." The coach's face went pale. "Good workout? You appear to be barely breathing hard." Jake looked around and realized that all the other students were panting and sweating from their exercises. His teammates looked exhausted while he felt like he had just finished a warm-up. "Should I tone it down a bit?" Jake asked quietly. "No," Coach Vexithera said quickly. "Please continue as you are. We are gathering important data about interspecies physical capabilities." Station 4 was the endurance running section. Students had to complete laps around a track while carrying lightweight packs. The target was 5 laps, and most students were walking or jogging very slowly. Jake's teammates started their laps. They moved at what Jake would call a gentle walk, stopping frequently to rest and drink water. Other students were doing the same, treating the 5 laps like a marathon. When Jake's turn came, he started at an easy jogging pace. The pack felt like it weighed almost nothing. He completed his first lap while his teammates were still halfway through theirs. By the time he finished all 5 laps, they had completed only 2. Jake was not even breathing hard. Station 5 was the strength testing area. Teams had to work together to lift and move weighted objects across a marked area. The weights were designed to challenge entire teams working together. Jake watched other teams struggle with objects that looked manageable. 5 or 6 students would gather around each weight, coordinating their efforts to lift and carry it slowly across the designated space. When Team 7's turn came, Jake's teammates gathered around their assigned weight. They strained and struggled, barely able to lift it together. Jake could see they were giving their best effort, but the weight was clearly too much for them. "Let me help," Jake said. He bent down and lifted the weight by himself. It felt like picking up a bag of groceries. He carried it across the marked area while his teammates followed behind, their mouths hanging open. "Where should I put this?" Jake asked. No one answered. Coach Vexithera was writing frantically on her data pad, her hands shaking. Around the gymnasium, other students had stopped their exercises entirely. Some were backing toward the exits. Jake set the weight down gently and looked around. Everyone was staring at him with expressions of pure terror. The silence was complete and absolute. "Did I do something wrong?" Jake asked. That was when the first student screamed. The scream came from a small Averian student who had been watching from across the gymnasium. The sound was high and sharp, like a bird caught in a trap. It echoed off the walls and seemed to break something in the air. Suddenly, chaos erupted, everywhere. More students began screaming. Averians took flight, their wings beating frantically as they tried to escape through the high windows. Lithoids flashed brilliant white light in panic, their crystal bodies sending rainbow patterns dancing across the walls. The lights were so bright that other students had to cover their eyes. Verdanians dropped their leaves in massive piles as their stress response kicked in. The floor became covered in green and brown as entire sections of students shed their foliage at once. Aquari biosuits began broadcasting emergency signals, filling the air with electronic wailing sounds. "Calm down," Coach Vexithera shouted, but her voice was lost in the noise. She moved toward the students, trying to restore order, but even she seemed afraid to get too close to Jake. Jake stood in the middle of the chaos, still holding the weight he had just lifted. He had no idea what was happening or why everyone was so upset. Around him, students were running in all directions, some trying to reach the exits, others huddling together in corners. "What's wrong?" Jake called out. "Did someone get hurt?" His voice made everything worse. More students screamed when they heard him speak. A group of lithoids near the wall went completely transparent, trying to become invisible. Several Verdanians fainted, their root systems shutting down from shock. Pip was pressed against the far wall with the rest of Team 7, all of them staring at Jake like he was a monster. Her feathers were completely puffed out, making her look twice her normal size. "Stay back," Pip squeaked. "Do not come any closer." Jake set the weight down carefully and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt anyone. I was just doing the exercise." But his movement toward them made his teammates scramble even further away. Knox's biosuit was beeping so rapidly it sounded like a machine gun. Keth had gone completely dark, his crystal body flickering like a broken light. Zara was dropping leaves so fast she looked like a tree in a hurricane. More students were trying to escape through the exits, but the doors were designed for calm, orderly movement. With everyone pushing and shoving to get out, they created traffic jams. Averians flew into each other. Aquari students fell over in their heavy biosuits. The emergency lights began flashing as the Academy's safety systems detected the mass panic. Coach Vexithara was speaking rapidly into her communication device, calling for help. Jake could hear words like emergency and evacuation and containment protocol. "Containment?" Jake said aloud. "What do they need to contain?" A lithoid student who had been trying to sneak past him heard this and let out a wail of terror. "It knows about containment. It understands our emergency procedures." This caused a fresh wave of panic. Students who had been moving toward exits now scattered in all directions, convinced that Jake was some kind of strategic threat who had been studying their defenses. Jake tried to think of something to say that would calm everyone down. "Look, I know I'm different, but I'm just a student like you. I'm here to learn and make friends." "Make friends," screamed an Averian from near the ceiling. "It wants to befriend us before it kills us." "I don't want to kill anyone," Jake protested. "That is exactly what a predator would say," shouted a Verdanian who was shedding leaves like snow. Jake realized that everything he said was making the situation worse. He stood very still and tried to think. Back home, when people were scared, you made yourself smaller and less threatening. He sat down on the floor, making himself as non-threatening as possible. This had the opposite effect. Several students screamed when they saw him crouch down. "It is getting into attack position," a lithoid yelled. "Predators crouch before they strike." Jake quickly stood back up, which caused more screaming. "It is preparing to jump. Look how high it can reach." Emergency. Alarms began sounding throughout the building. Jake could hear the sound of many footsteps running toward the gymnasium. Security forces and medical teams were responding to the crisis. Through one of the high windows, Jake could see students from other buildings gathering outside, pointing up at the gymnasium. Word was spreading across the entire academy that something terrible was happening in the gym. Coach Vexithara had given up trying to restore order. She was backed against the equipment storage area, speaking frantically into her device. Jake caught some of her words. "Yes, the human student. No, no injuries. Yet, but we need immediate intervention. The panic response is spreading. Some students are going into shock. Jake noticed that several students had indeed collapsed. The stress was too much for their systems. Avarians lay on the floor with their wings spread wide, breathing rapidly. Lithoids had gone completely dark and stopped moving. Verdanians had shed all their leaves and looked like bare sticks. Someone needs medical attention, Jake said, starting to move toward a fallen Avarian. Stay away from them, Coach Vexithera screamed. Do not touch anyone. Do not move. Jake froze. He watched helplessly as students suffered from panic and stress. While he stood in the middle of the gymnasium like a statue, everything he did, even trying to help, made things worse. The main doors burst open and Academy security forces rushed in. They were followed by medical teams with floating stretchers and emergency equipment. Principal Lyra Sind came through, the doors last, her liquid skin shifting rapidly through colors Jake had never seen before. Clear the area, the principal commanded. Medical teams, attend to the distressed students. Security, establish a perimeter. The security forces began moving students toward the exits in an orderly fashion. The medical teams went to work on those who had collapsed from stress. Jake noticed they all wore protective gear and kept their distance from him. Principal Lyra Sind approached Jake slowly, her hands visible and movements careful. Mr. Martinez, I need you to come with me. We have much to discuss. Jake looked around the gymnasium one last time. Students were being carried out on stretchers. Others limped toward the exits supported by medical staff. The entire place looked like a disaster zone. I was just doing gym class, Jake said quietly. I know, the principal replied. That is exactly the problem. Jake followed her toward the exit, walking through the scattered leaves, broken crystal, fragments, and emergency equipment that covered the floor. Behind him, the gymnasium stood empty except for the echoes of panic and the flashing emergency lights. He had no idea how a simple exercise class had turned into the worst disaster in the Academy's history. All he had done was participate in the activities like everyone else. But as he walked through the aftermath, Jake began to understand that he was not like everyone else at all. He was something these peaceful beings had never encountered before. He was human, and that, apparently, was terrifying. Principal Lyra Sind led Jake to her office through empty hallways. Word of the gymnasium incident had spread across the entire academy. Students peered out from classroom windows as they passed, then quickly ducked back inside when they saw Jake. The principal's office was a calm space with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. Jake sat in a chair that adjusted itself to fit his human shape, while Principal Lyra Sind moved to her desk. Her liquid skin was still shifting colors, a sign she was deeply troubled. Mr. Martinez, she began, we need to discuss what happened, today. Jake looked down at his hands. I'm sorry about the panic. I didn't mean to scare anyone. I was just doing the exercises like everyone else. That is precisely the issue, the principal said gently. You were doing the exercises like a human. We failed to understand what that would mean. She activated a holographic display that showed images from Jake's home planet. Earth appeared as a blue and green sphere, beautiful but somehow menacing, compared to the perfect worlds Jake had seen in other presentations. Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, the principal explained. This means it is considered one of the most dangerous environments in known space. Most species would die within days on Earth's surface. Jake looked at the images of his home. It's not that bad. People live normal lives there. Normal for humans, the principal corrected. But humans are not normal, Mr. Martinez. Your species evolved under conditions that would terrify most galactic citizens. The display showed information about Earth's gravity, weather patterns, and wildlife. Numbers appeared that Jake had never thought about before. Earth's gravity was nearly 3 times what most species considered comfortable. Its weather included storms that could level cities. Its oceans contained creatures larger than spaceships. Your body was built by millions of years of survival on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds, the principal continued. What seems normal to you appears superhuman to us. Jake watched footage of his classmates being treated in the medical center. Some were still unconscious from stress. Others sat in recovery pods, slowly recovering from shock. "I hurt them without even trying," Jake said quietly. "You did not hurt them," Principal Lyrisind replied. "You simply existed as what you are. The fault lies with us for not preparing properly." Over the following days, the academy worked to address the crisis. Counselors met with frightened students to help them understand that Jake was not a threat. Scientists studied human biology to explain his capabilities. The story spread across galactic news networks, sparking debates about death-world species and their integration into civilized society. Jake spent most of his time in his room, feeling like a monster. His roommates had requested transfers to other housing. Students avoided the dining hall when he was there. Even the teachers seemed nervous around him. But slowly, things began to change. Dr. Veltara, his biology teacher, was the first to approach him directly. She found him sitting alone in the academy gardens, looking sad and isolated. "Mr. Martinez," she said, settling her plant-like form nearby. "I have been researching your species extensively since the incident." Jake looked up. "I suppose you want me to transfer to a different school?" "On the contrary," Dr. Veltara said. "I believe your presence here offers an unprecedented learning opportunity. Would you be willing to give a presentation about Earth and human evolution?" Jake was surprised. "You want me to talk about being human?" "I want you to help us understand. Fear comes from ignorance. Perhaps knowledge can replace fear with respect." The first presentation was small, just Dr. Veltara's advanced biology class. Jake talked about growing up in New York City, about Earth's history and geography, about how humans had adapted to survive on a dangerous world. He explained that his reflexes and strength were not supernatural abilities, but natural results of evolution. The students listened with fascination instead of fear. They asked questions about human culture, about Earth's animals, about what it was like to live with natural disasters and dangerous weather. Some even seemed impressed rather than terrified. Word spread about Jake's presentations. More teachers requested sessions for their classes. Students who had been afraid began to approach him with curiosity instead of panic. Pip was the first of his original roommates to speak to him again. She found him after one of his presentations, her feathers still ruffled with nervousness, but her eyes bright with interest. "Is it true that humans can run for hours without stopping?" she asked. "Some can," Jake said. "Marathon runners train for years to do it." "And you really lived in a city with millions of other humans?" 12 million, actually. It's crowded, but you get used to it." Pip looked thoughtful. "That sounds terrifying and amazing at the same time." Jake smiled. "Most things about Earth are like that." Gradually, his other roommates returned. Keth wanted to understand how human muscles worked. Zara was fascinated by Earth's plant life and the concept of seasons. Knox could barely believe that humans lived on land surrounded by vast oceans full of dangerous creatures. Coach Vexathara approached Jake about returning to physical education class. "We have redesigned the program," she explained. "Instead of standard exercises, we would like you to serve as both participant and instructor." The new gym class was different from anything the academy had ever offered. Jake helped design modified exercises that challenged the alien students appropriately, while allowing him to participate meaningfully. He taught them about human training methods, showing them how to push their own limits safely. The alien students discovered they were capable of more than they had believed. Under Jake's encouragement, Pip learned she could fly for longer distances. Keth found that his crystal body could bear more weight than he had thought possible. Zara developed climbing techniques that impressed even Jake. Jake learned to modulate his abilities, moving more slowly and carefully to avoid frightening his classmates. He became a bridge between worlds, helping peaceful species understand the harsh realities that had shaped humanity while showing them that strength and gentleness could coexist. The academy began receiving requests from other schools across the galaxy. They wanted to establish their own exchange programs with Deathworld species. Jake's experience became a model for integration and understanding between radically different forms of life. Months later, Jake stood in the same gymnasium where the panic had occurred. This time, it was filled with laughter and encouragement, as alien students cheered each other through challenging exercises. His former teammates worked together on obstacle courses, pushing themselves to achieve goals they had never thought possible. Coach Vexthara watched from the sidelines, taking notes on student progress. "Who would have thought," she said to Dr. Veltara, "that our most frightening student would become our most inspiring teacher?" Jake helped a nervous lithoid student across a balance beam, offering encouragement and support. The student's crystal body glowed with pride as he completed the challenge. Around them, other students worked on their own goals, no longer limited by fear of what they might encounter. What had begun as the worst disaster in academy history had become its greatest success story. Jake Martinez, the human who had terrorized an entire school, had taught them all something valuable about courage, growth, and the strength that comes from facing your fears. And in the process, he had found his place among the stars.